Okay. So I think so welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us to have this conversation about Razzismo Brutta Storia and the work that has been done in the context of Italy. My name is Justin Randolph Thompson, and I'm the co-founder and director of Black History Month Florence, which is an initiative that was born in 2016 to sort of generate a network of institutions and individuals working together towards a sort of common goal in the context of Italy, examining and reflecting upon Afro-descendant peoples and cultures and the diversity that actually represents. And then also really sort of advancing a cultural moment every year that consists in between 50 and 60 events. We're particularly happy that this year we've been able to, despite all of the difficulty and complexity of this moment, that we've been able to grow rather than sort of shrink in this context, and you know, to be able to extend beyond the context of Florence thanks to platforms like this and virtual platforms. So it's some of the collaborations that we've had with a number of individuals and institutions to extend beyond what we sort of started with. So I wanted to start by thanking the Florentine, who we initiated a column with them at the summer, and you know, advancing sort of stability through an Afro-descent. And you know, I think that's been really magical and helpful for us, and we were very contribute about 6 articles to the February issue, and to have a number of different reflections within that. And within that reflection, there was also a contribution from Razzismo Brutta Storia as a way of sort of thinking about the ongoing collaboration that we've had. I first met Mackda in 2019 through a lecture that was given in Florence that I was able to organize and attend, and to sort of begin having a conversation about anti-racist activism in the context of Italy, which I think is a greatly under-debated conversation. And it's something that especially when it comes to thinking about the educational context in which we find ourselves, especially growing up in this context, that it's been really sort of a magical way to sort of collaborate together and really begin to think about some things. So I'm really here with me today to talk a little bit about Razzismo Brutta Storia, which I think it's possible that in the English language, maybe there's been less conversation about the work. And so maybe it's a helpful way of thinking this initiative and the work that's being done within, and the ways in which it applies to the context of Italy, and of course beyond this context. And so we'll be talking a little bit about some of the origins and some of the work that's being done in Italy, but also some of the ways in which that work connects to a broader context of Europe. So thank you so much, Mackda, for joining me.
Thank you, Justin, and hi, everybody. Also, I want to say it was a trap because Justin told me it was in Italian until today.
I think that I didn't specify.
Yeah.
But I thank you for the extra effort in sort of meeting us in this conversation. Yeah, I'm hoping that I know it'll be a learning process for me, because I feel like one of the amazing things about the sort of network of people that are involved in your, it seems like every year I meet new people and they tell me that they're involved as well, which is sort of, I think of it as a bit of a calling card where, you know, I understand a little bit more about what, you know, it's like a stamp of approval somehow to know that these are people that are working with the project. And it's really been exciting to sort of meet, even virtually, a number of people who are contributing, and to really think about ways in which we might be able to collaborate more. And so I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to talk with you. I wanted to talk at the beginning by thinking about these sort of origins, and you know, for those that don't know Razzismo Brutta Storia, I figured maybe you could talk a little bit about simultaneously a little bit of the origin story, like how Razzismo Brutta Storia comes about, but then mainly the fact it's born to combat racism through educational projects. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about education and sort of more of the formative dimension of racism.
Okay. So thank you very much for the question, Justin. Razzismo Brutta Storia was born in 2008 as a campaign after the murder of a 19-year-old called Abba in Milan. Abba was murdered because he allegedly stole some biscuits. And it was like a brutal awakening for a lot of people in Italy. So it was evident the racial motive, but it was never admitted by a court. So it started as a campaign after this event, and became brought by Feltrinelli and others, and it became an association in 2011. So Razzismo Brutta Storia kind of work with the cultural dimension. So it's not just about education. Of course, culture is racist because racism is structural, and culture is a very important aspect of how racism is transmitted and how racism is constructed and reproduced. So we know for sure that culture is power, and power lies within culture. So that is why, as the founder of this campaign, like always did, we believe in an idea of culture that is a political idea, that is a transformative idea, that is about using culture to develop new strategies of political activism, actually. And education, of course, is a part of this. So education, Razzismo Brutta Storia does a lot of work within schools, but not just in school, because education is not just something that is like limited to the school environment. So we participated in events, we built various kind of activities to educate through different platforms. In Italy, there is kind of a problem with anti-racism and education, because for a long time, like doing anti-racism was not really something that belonged to the educational panorama. We have like a long history of intercultural kind of programs, and the problems with this kind of perspective, which is useful to do something. But the problem is that as long as we confuse racism with xenophobia, or racism with prejudice, or racism with stereotyping, we are not actually seeing the political nature of racism. We are not seeing racism as a system of power, and we're not seeing the structural dimension of racism. So we kind of, also there is like a psychologization, is it right to say it, of the person that is guilty of carrying racist attitudes and behavior, while racism is not just about the individual. And like looking at racism through this individual lens is like part of system of like taking really taking yourself out of this question of the theme, because you just say, okay, no, I'm not a racist. Like I don't actually discriminate, but we are trying to make people understand that racism is a system in Italy too. And so this is basically what I would say about like trying to build a new frame to understand racism in the Italian society. Yes, this.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate the way that you take us from thinking about education through the lens of something that is strictly institutional into thinking more broadly about the cultural impact and the ways in which throughout culture and different facets of culture, we're grappling with a lot of these concerns. And I think that it's also particularly important. I really appreciated with the period of lockdowns, there was a campaign that you all did that I really appreciated, which was about language. And it really helped me to understand also the ways in which in the Italian language, a lot of the terminology that is needed to really engage in a critical conversation is not very present and is not very shared as vocabulary. So I really appreciate that that series of interventions that were about introducing language. And I think it's really an incredibly helpful way to sort of think about how do we provide the tools to sort of engage in these kinds of conversations. And so I like the way that you all are also not only thinking about that you're thinking about projects that happen in so many different contexts and the need for an intervention in so many different platforms, right? So I really appreciate that. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of a more complicated question that I think is one that I think has come up very often in the work of Black History Month Florence, in that the initiative itself, which is about the sort of celebration of Afro-descendant cultures, it's understood as a festival that is an anti-racist festival. And I've always sort of spent time thinking about what that means to be understood through that lens, rather than being understood so as this sort of counter to, rather than being understood as something that is proactively celebratory. And so I wonder, thinking about also the kit that you developed, which is I Love My Hair, which is a didactic kit, and thinking about the ways in which the language of that carry these layers of celebration and self-love, self-care. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about any, well, let's just say the crossing of a context that is understood strictly through the language of anti-racist versus a language that is understood as self-love, celebratory, and maybe even self-preservation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We were debating about it during these days. First, it happened that a friend of ours, an expert of Razzismo Brutta Storia, has Black children, decided to buy and read the book I Love My Hair to his children. So we decided to try to translate it in Italian in order to have the possibility for this book, which is a classic, to be new by the Italian public. The key then, after the release of the book in Italian, which is Amo I miei capelli, we decided to turn it to use it as a tool to build an educational program around it. So it became something different. Giulia, who is the project manager of Razzismo Brutta Storia, did a lot of interviews to Afro-descendant Italian women who talk about their relationship with their hair. These videos became like 4 chapters of a story, which is the story of how they actually, their relation with their hair and how it developed through time, from like fruits from the beginning, growing up until their hair became a site of resistance, and like it is a path to self-love, and you know, and this kind of love, it is to me personally a political love. I'll explain myself better. Of course, we interrogate ourselves a lot about what it means to take this educational tool not only to Afro-descendants, kids and young adults, but also to Italians one. Because sometimes we enter a classroom in which there are no Afro-descendants, and maybe there are like veiled women and other kind, other person, other people that are racialized in their daily lives. So, but these videos, to me, they became a way to talk to a lot of different people about what it means to be, in fact, to be racialized through a feature, but and overcoming these this kind of oppression, but also it is a way to show how actually our bodies are crossed by power. So a lot of different people can relate, and when people relate, we can like make them distinguish like one situation, one type of oppression to other, like also opening up to a sort of intersectional idea of like representation and also then alliance. So it is an open process for us. It is like working we are working on it, and this month we had like our first pilot in school, and it was like really really important, because we understood that, like, first of all, they are more woke than we thought. Like, we got question on cultural appropriation, which is not like something that it was like we could not take for granted, that like they actually know what cultural appropriation is. So like this video really can really made us connect with a broad audience, and we are trying to understand what actually really this means in an anti-racist educational perspective. But regarding your question on the difference between self-love and like celebration and empowerment and anti-racism as like a way of like putting racism first and then counteract. So like always starting from like this other point of view, this like white point of view, this also this white gaze, because like it is also white eyes that looks that look at this video. I personally, as Mackda, believe that self-love for the Black community is something political. It is something that is actually anti-racist, because we are taught, we learn racism too. We learn to deny our bodies, we learn to straighten our hair, we learn to dislike what we are. And racism, in order to work, it needs us to believe too in its ideology, in its system, in its truth, you know, and like unmasking this lie that is, you know, that is revealing the black body in its beauty. In its beauty, it is really anti-racist to me. But I agree that we have to understand what are also kind of the analytical difference between these two perspectives. Most of all because we are entering classroom and spaces that are not just black or white or Arab or Asian. We are entering, in fact, multicultural spaces. So we have to understand which is the right tool to use and why. I really believe that this book and this video, it's really important for the Black community in Italy, and we needed it. And we are trying to understand how we can broaden and we can use it as an anti-racist tool in spaces that are not just composed by Afro-descendants.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that really in-depth answer, which I think also really dives into some of the complexity that is involved in sort of trying to create a distinction between these two things that actually ultimately quite often overlap. And it's a contextual thing as well, where perhaps in the Italian context, you know, one is the other in a certain sense. And I think that, you know, I'm thinking now about sort of more of the national footprint of Feltrinelli, and you know, really the ways in which it can speak on a national scale to these questions and to these issues, and be present in multiple cities across the country. And I think that, you know, when we understand the ways in which racism is embedded into a lot of the cultural panorama in the context of Italy, that national platform seems particularly helpful in really giving a sense. You know, we talk a lot about normalizing these conversations. Like, how do we get to this state where these are conversations that are fairly banal, that are not, you know, that don't provoke, right? And I think that, you know, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about in your introduction, you talked a little bit about the context of Italy and some of the work that needs to be done in this space. And you know, you talked about this murder that sort of is the impetus for the start of this this project. And you know, that there's many similar murders that have been deemed not racially you know, motivated, that have taken place you know, over the years. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Italian context more broadly, and the ways in which, you know, what work you think really needs to happen in this context. And I know that this is a really mega question, but I think that you've started to sort of tease out some of the aspects of early education. But I'm wondering, you know, if you could talk a little bit about other cultural territories where you think this work really needs to be done, whether we're talking about dialogues around citizenship that I know you're all involved in, whether you're talking about conversations and sort of more flattened conversations about migration, and these as sort of territories for these kinds of discussions to happen.
Okay, for sure. Thank you, Justin. Then, first of all, I have to say that, like, participating in the Black History Month with you, and thank you for inviting us, gave us the chance of having a bibliographical selection in a lot of Feltrinellis around the country, and it was really a good way, a nice way to bring our ideas and like let people know like Black narratives and Black Black studies and Black authors across the country. So it was really an important event for us to have all these different libraries like joining together to create this event. And yeah, as the selection of books we choose, like the themes are really wide. So of course you were talking about the citizenship. Now there is a struggle that is like 20 years old now. So she can drink, and she that is about like reforming the citizenship law, because in Italy there is the jus sanguinis, and maybe everybody knows it, but like just to remember that like children of migrants and that are like born here and that grow up here, they are actually non-citizen. So there is this movement which we support, strongly support, that is Italiani senza cittadinanza, that summarize perfectly this concept. So they are Italians, but they are not recognized as. And it is one of our like most. It is one of the most evident points of where actual institutional racism is in the Italian system. But there are a lot of like racism is structural, so we can see it in a variety of places. For example, the job market and the world of the work is really racialized. So there is a color line in the job market, and there are like right now there are 3 places where you can actually see it at work. It is also gendered. It's not just racialized, but like race is always gendered. But we can see it in the agricultural labor, and where a lot of episodic racism is displayed. We can see it in the struggle of the riders. Like in a lot of cities, we see that riders are migrants or asylum seekers. Tends to find this kind of work in the city center. And during the pandemic, they kept working. They kept working without being recognized, and it is also because they are racialized. It's not just because they are like these gig workers that are not. So like these two, it's like an intersectional way, like these two conditions build each other. And we can talk about sort of a necropolitic around this kind of worker, both the agricultural worker and the riders. But we can see it also in the care chain. So care workers in Italy are migrants, are female women migrants, and they are like, they are not they are not cared about. They care for us, and they are totally forgotten. And also, we don't collect in Italy equality data, but we know for sure that as in Great Britain, as in the United States, like these kind of workers were the most affected by the pandemic. And that is why the sanatoria, I don't know how to translate it in English, you know, but the process.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to call it in English as well, but it's something that was legalized to facilitate access to the permit to stay.
Yeah, was like built along these lines of work. It was just for the care workers and the agricultural workers. Like in the middle of the pandemic, we recognized we need them, and we don't want migrants. We don't want but we want you because we need you. So like it was built up this system of regularization. So we have to really work at the job market in Italy to understand how race and class interact and co-construct each other, like putting at the end Black people at the bottom of the pit. There is also a rise in the episodic racism, as we can see by Lunaria, so Cronache di Ordinario Razzismo, which is one of the only source we have on episodic racism, and it's not like statistically really solid, because it's not like it's not registered every aggression. It's just the one that are called for, that people denounce. We can see a huge rise in the violences and in verbal and physical assault. But in Italy, as we all know, the most frequent form of racism is like institutional racism that comes from political propaganda. So I said everything because racism is everywhere in Italy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you so much for diving into that. And I think, I think mapping out some of these territories is helpful to also think about the ways in which, when we talk about racism and, Afro-descendant peoples in the context of Italy, that we have to touch on all of these different dimensions, whether we're talking about people that are recently arrived here or that have been here for generations. And the ways in which these different groups of people overlap, I think is particularly complex. And I think it's also where there tends to be a less complex vision and understanding of what is being represented, right? I think, I wanted to talk a little bit about, because I was seeing that you all are engaged also in some, beyond the importance of a national framework platform, you're also engaged in, a transnational platform and a conversation across Europe. And I'm wondering, what that context has represented for your work and your vision to sort of connect to other similar realities that exist across Europe, and to think together about approaches and tactics that might be shared.
Yeah. Yes. As we were saying, like the Feltrinelli helped to have a national, like to open nationally, and basically ENAR, which is the European Network Against Racism, helps to bring up the discussion and level up the discussion at European level. It is very important for us to try to create advocacy network that are able to actually reach the heart of Europe, because migration in Italy is like strongly linked to racism. So it is important to have a platform that can actually interact and face European institution regarding migration policies. that is why it's really important for Razzismo Brutta Storia to have this vision, to like learn from also learn from the other state what is really happening in Germany or in France or in Brussels, which is a city. It's not a state. It is important because the European Commission is there, and like find the strategies that can be common in order to achieve a European coalition against racism and for migrants' rights and rights of migrations. So if we keep thinking only at a national level, we cannot really tackle racism, because, for example, just making this example, the Dublin Protocol is one of the is one of the biggest problem for migrants right now, especially for migrants that are coming from sub-Saharan Africa, because they are the ones that cannot be relocated. They are the ones that like have to stay where they arrive. There were no human path, corridoi humanitari, humanitarian pathways through Europe for people from sub-Saharan Africa. So if we really want to think about European policy on migration, we have to think with Europe and with European partners.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking about also the nature of these sort of partnerships that extend beyond the national territory, but also about how within this more national territory, how your work is happening from a collective standpoint. And so, as I mentioned before, I've sort of encountered a number of people that work with you, and I've always been sort of like amazed when I meet more. I'm like, wow, there's more people, and I wonder, because I think that there's so much to be done, and there's so many different aspects to be tackled. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about collective work. So maybe you can talk a little bit behind the scenes about how it works to have all of these thinkers that are working with you.
So this is Giulia's work. So after a long time, I'm with the Razzismo Brutta Storia since a little time. I was collaborating as an expert like since a year. And then now I'm actually working for Razzismo Brutta Storia since December. Giulia, like in 2019, Giulia had this need, this vision to actually open up Razzismo Brutta Storia to a lot of different, mostly racialized people, in order to make Razzismo Brutta Storia.
You muted yourself. There you go. You only stepped out for a second.
Yeah. Okay. So as I was saying, it was her idea, and it was her like need of having people confronting on this issue, and having racialized people like doing the talk and doing the work. And we are not just Afro-descendant; we are a lot of Afro-descendant. We are. But there are also Roma people, like we have like connection with different movements. There is also like people that has like Latin American origins. There is also Italian people who are like working since a long time on this issue. So different kind of experiences. And that is why it's written Mackda and Co, because I'm here, and sometimes I am afraid I'm saying stuff that I think, but we try to elaborate together our point of view, and it is a long process. And it takes a lot of patience and energy, because democratic processes are very long. But it is a work that needs to be done also for some of us. And I have to admit, I'm not like it was not my first time, but one of the first time I got the chance of being in a room talking with 20 people that are actually racialized, 20 people, 20 different person to confront with about racism. And it is not something to take for granted in Italy, because we, especially people of my age, because I'm 34, and growing up, I was like the only Black children in the school, every school, like from the primary school too. So it was like always me lecturing on racism, white people, and it is really different, the process, when you are a lot of different people talking about embedded experiences. And it is really important, because it makes us understand that there is not like we are trying to build a community. We are trying to build an anti-racist community, and we have to deal with identity issues. And we have to understand we don't have an identity. There are a lot of different identities that needs to come in contact and needs to also fight each other in order to understand what way we should really try to walk towards our collective goal. So our process is basically very long. But in this process, we are actually building our community.
Yeah, I really like the dimension of simultaneously having to sort of face the range of perspectives that are present anytime there's a gathering, but then also the ways in which there is a form of community that's there to engage in these conversations, which I think that just that tends to be something that helps to get past some of the isolation of having these conversations on our own. So it sort of really highlights some of the importance of sort of shared conversation, shared dialogue, shared work. We have I wanted to talk a little bit about this current events, and something that is really sort of brand new. But I wanted to point to maybe after we talk about the current events, we can point to this question that came in that is thinking about the colonial past in the context of Italy. But maybe before we get into that, you could talk a little bit about the context of this new, prize, this new collaboration with the Centrale FIES, and maybe discuss a little bit how that comes about and what it stands for. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it went out.
Oh,
when you said colonialism, I just
okay. Yeah, it's like it's somebody sort of watching in and deciding that this is going to happen. Okay. But what I was saying is that I think there's a question that maybe we can answer about Italian colonialism and its role. But I think before talking about that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about this sort of current events and the collaboration with Centrale FIES, and just to talk a little bit about what that signifies, how it came about, and the ways in which it's a part of this broader process that you were all involved in. Okay. And then we can go to the colonialism question.
So I will make a statement, which is that art is always a big part of a movement. So art and culture are really something that belongs to movement and support movement and give an aesthetic, which is something really important. for movement. And so that is why we started to think about art and like racism and anti-racism in arts. And we have a lot, I mean, a lot. We have some artists among us. And talking with these artists, we understood how, like, because of race and class, and sometimes also because of gender, like actually entering the art world is difficult for racialized people. That is why we try to understand how we could build an alternative, like an opportunity. And we called Centrale PS, like just saying, like we say in Italian, faccia tosta. That is, I don't know how to say that.
I mean, I would say straight face, but it doesn't translate properly because it's not aggressive enough.
Okay. So with a straight face, we went to Centrale Fies, which is this place, with this amazing place, like one of the most important performative arts center in Italy. And we said, why don't we have a scholarship for racialized people? And they said yes, just right away, like this. They said yes. They said yes, but how we talk about it. And it started a long process on how actually build this scholarship. And the process is coming to an end today because the scholarship is out. We didn't want to have a scholarship that was like an affirmative action in a diversity and inclusion frame, because we don't think that like art need to have more Black people or Asian people or just to reflect more society, because society is diverse, so art should be diverse. Okay, of course, society is diverse and art should be diverse, but we think that racialized people cannot enter these spaces because of actual material and symbolic barriers, and we wanted a way to face and bring down these barriers. So it is an affirmative action kind of strategy, but we like to look at it as like some steps, a step toward reparation, which is something we don't discuss in Italy, but we discuss as Razzismo Brutta Storia, and we are trying to understand how we can actually try to reparate some of the injustice that Black people, racialized people suffer in Italy. The injustice of not having like the recognition of your Italianness, you know, the struggle with the class system and everything that is like taking racialized people down in Italy in this moment.
No, thank you so much for talking about that. And I think also it sort of is a good lead into the question that we have that is from Stefano Duc. And it says, I believe that a big part of Italy's endemic racism comes from the country's colonial history, I'm imagining is the word that should be in there, which is still not being faced. And I know that this is something that is often a conversation that is had. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about you know, the relationship between sort of Italian's colonial history and the aspects of culture with which we're grappling today.
So Italian colonialism, it's like Italy has an amnesia or a selected memory on its colonial past. Its colonial past that tend to be like closed just on the fascist time, but actually Italy had like a liberal colonialism. As soon as Italy became a state, Italy tried to gain colonies because it needed colony in order to be a white country, an European country, an empire. So it was really important for Italy. But as soon as Italy lost the colony, as Italy lost like everything, because in the Second World War, there was this quick move of amnesia, like ended like the racial dimension was just linked to the racial law that was only linked to the fascist regime. And as long as we are not fascist anymore, which is like, we are not sure about it, but as long as there is no fascism, then there is no racism. And that is how actual race was erased by the Italian vocabulary, because we cannot see there is like a struggle in using the word race in Italian, because people say race doesn't exist. Of course, race doesn't exist in biology, but race are social constructs and they're like factual in their effect. So we have to talk about race. But the word race is linked to this colonial period, so it is erased as the colonial past. I believe that every kind of race is linked to colonialism, because colonialism is one point in history where it's like it cannot be really severed from racism. It's kind of like historical and material bringer. And in Italy, this is especially true because of this like post-racial fantasy that was like Cristina Lombardi Diop really talked about it in post-colonial Italy beautifully. It's not just Italy; a lot of countries in Europe have like a post-racial fantasy that is linked to the idea that the colonialism is ended. And then if colonialism is not anymore, then racism is not anymore. But in fact, Italy has a stronger amnesia than other countries. And yeah, this led us. I don't. Do you? Are you here?
Yeah, sorry, I went away and then I came back. No.
So it happened to you too. Nice. So yeah, there is a strong link to the colonial past, and the colonial past is really present but not talked about. It's not taught in school. So I was having a seminar last Tuesday, and I asked how many of the students were taught about colonialism during their high school, and nobody, nobody. So like not talking about colonialism is like a way of not taking responsibility of how the world system actually evolved.
Right.
And it's really striking because we have a lot of Eritrean people. I'm Eritrean. Okay, there are a lot of Eritrean people coming from the Mediterranean route. We had one of the worst shipwreck of migration history in the Mediterranean, near to Lampedusa, the 3 October of 2013. Still, Italy didn't acknowledge like what was the actual link between these people and the country. So yeah, like forgetting colonialism is the most obvious way to forget your responsibility and like forget your your responsibility, how you constructed a racialized world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a really great answer in terms of thinking about the ways in which that past connects really explicitly to the present that we're living. Right. And I think, you know, one thing I've been really happy about with the context of this issue of the Florentine is that we have over the use of the column, we've actually had the opportunity to have writers like Angelica Pezzerini, writers like Daphne Budas, and in this edition also Jessica Sartiani talking about the relationship between coffee and colonialism. And so there's all these ways in which it's embedded in Italian culture, Italian contemporary culture, but again, it's not really talked about. And so, I think that it's been really important for me to think about the ways in which these conversations need to emerge more and more. And I think you're right about the context of school systems. I have 2 daughters that have gone through the Italian school system, and they report to me on what happens in the chapters that are dedicated to Africa, the few that there are. It's usually a page. And of course, it's a part of the bigger issue in thinking about the Italian past without those moments there and the importance of that. So I want to close just by thanking you for joining us for this conversation, and thank all of you for being with us. It's been a really pleasure to sit down and talk with Mackda. We haven't had that many opportunities to talk together, and so it's also really important for me to use these sort of moments as a form of exchange and to think about learning from your own process as a way of sort of then expanding upon the work that needs to be done. So I really appreciate your generosity and time, and I really appreciate the work of Razzismo Brutta Storia in this context. And so please read on, visit Feltrinelli, and you can see some of these bibliographies that have been put together, and take a moment to look at the Black History Month Florence catalog. Booklet program. I don't know what to call it anymore. I think it's like 68 pages. But tonight there's more. We're starting a concert series that is called E il clamore è divenuto voce, featuring 3 Black Italian singers thinking about music and activism, music and messaging. And so I invite all of you to share and watch the concert at 9:30 Italian time tonight, so in 3.5 hours, that features Dre Love. And Dre Love, for those that don't know, is the co-founder of Black History Month Florence. So he's someone who really worked with me to start this journey. Thank you again to the Florentine, to Jane, and to Helen, who have been really amazing in this whole process. And we will catch up soon at one of these other events.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.